Okay, hello YouTube. I wanted to start off this video with the with my 7.3 liter diesel idling, just to demonstrate that I finally conquered a absolutely miserable problem, and you would presumably know it as the p1316 check engine light that comes on. And so I'll try to go quick through what I went through to solve that problem. Obviously, I was getting it, and I'll tell you what the solution was after spending maybe, I don't know, a lot of money, maybe $1,000 working on trying to solve that problem. And the solution is fairly simple, so I do think this video is worth listening to, but I'll tell you how I conquered it. First of all, you got to make sure that the wires underneath the individual heads, I mean, I'll point to it, the head, you got to make sure those are replaced and they're working good. And I did that. Of course, I actually replaced all of my injectors, believe it or not, and all of my glow plugs, thinking it might have something to do with it. All right. What it will say, if you read about it, you go on Google and you check that code out, p1316. What it says is it's the IDM. Well, for the record, where that thing is if I come out here and look at it, it's up underneath there, okay? It's not that hard to get out. You don't even have to take the wheel off if you don't want to. You just have to take that plastic cover off, and then you pull it out of there. Now, I've replaced 3 or 4 of those, and they were bad, there's no question, but that wasn't the real issue. What was making them bad was the real issue, and I'll explain to you what, in my case, was making them go bad. What the IDM does is it has a series of wires that come up from it, and it comes into that big plug, down there, near where my finger is, and it plugs in, and then it goes to the individual injectors. And the way it works is one of the wires is a high voltage wire which goes to one of the heads, and then there's another high voltage wire which goes to the other head, and then there's a series of small wires, and I think I'm right about this. What happens is the high voltage goes to all the injectors, and then there's individual wires which go back to the IDM, and they short the injector so that it fires. Okay, and they short it to ground, okay, the IDM does. So you've got basically 4 of those wires and 2 of the high voltage wires, 1 to each head. Okay, so here was what happened. I replaced the IDM a number of times, not knowing why they kept going bad, okay? Now, if you replace the IDM, word to the wise, there's a place called ALL Computer Resources. They're down in Florida. No, I'm not getting a promo from them. I just used them when I solved this problem. And they do a good job. At least in my case, they did a good job. But I kept blowing them up, okay? And I just got determined, and I just thought, no, this can't be that hard to figure out. And so here's what I ended up doing, okay, is I'm going to put my hand in there. I got some of this stuff out of the way, and there's a big plug right down there, okay? And I got the thing idling, okay? And then what I did is I reached down and I grabbed that big column of wires which comes from the plug down the side of the engine. Now, I realized that those wires will sometimes short out against the head and so on, but I could see that mine weren't doing that. So what I did was I reached down, and while it was running, I grabbed that big wire, and I just started to massage it while the engine was running, okay? The big column of wires going down there. And the speed of the engine started to change, and I realized, oh, shit, those individual wires are shorting out against one another. I mean, this is a 2000 7.3 liter diesel Excursion. So the wires are old. They're 25 years old. Okay. So anyway, in massaging those wires, you know, that whole column of wires. While the thing was running, I got the thing to change in speed so I could see, yeah, things were shorting against one another. So what I did was I thought, okay, I think I found my problem, I think. And what I did was, you can see these wires here, okay? Those are all things I put in there, okay? And I put a plug up there at the top. But basically what I did was I got the color code of that plug that plugs into the IDM. Okay, it plugs up like that, and it's a series of colored wires. Now, you're not going to be taking all those colored wires loose. You're only taking the ones that go to the injectors. And I, one by one, very carefully made sure that each one of those wires corresponded to the correct place, you know, on the plug on each one of the heads. And then you can see I kind of came over the top and I put a plug in there. It might, some of you guys are going to say this looks Mickey Mouse, but I wanted to bypass the entire Ford system because there's all kinds of wires in there, and some of them you don't want to disconnect them because you don't know where they're going. They're going back to the computer or something else. So all I did was just isolate the wires on the IDM, color by color by color, wire by wire, and made sure they went to the corresponding, you know, injector on each one of the heads. And you got to be careful about this, but it's all online. Every bit of this information is there. And by the way, I did the same thing on the glow plugs. And so I've got my own system for the glow plugs over here, and I can hit a button and I can light them all up, you know, in cold weather or whatever. But then it's done through relays, so it just goes back to the default, which is the computer. So the computer doesn't think there's something wrong. I can just light them up with my system here before I actually turn the key, and that did work. In other words, I'll be I'm in California, so this is not always the case, but if I go to some place and it gets real cold at night, I'll push the button for like 6 minutes and then turn the key, and it turns on the glow plugs also, but at least the glow plugs are already hot when the thing starts turning over. And anyway, I hope this video helps. That bundle of wires, you can see it there, those gray wires, all the way up to a plug, all the way to the individual injectors, and it did solve the problem, and I quit smoking IDMs. Now I keep a spare IDM. I've gotten to the point where I can get them out of there in 15 minutes, you know, and I keep a spare IDM in my Excursion here, just in case something would go wrong, but it's been running so beautifully since I did that. I realized that the old wiring harness, you know, the wires had just shorted against each other. They just got old. Also, you know, you can buy a new wiring harness now on eBay for not very much money. I mean, they didn't used to have that available. They do now. But it goes only up to that plug. And where my problem was from the plug down to the IDM, you know, under there. So I could have replaced the wiring harness. Wouldn't have done me any good because that wasn't where the problem was. And I have one wire by wire by wire in this thing. Pretty much replaced everything that's in the valley, and you know, just to put new, better wire in there, because a whole wiring harness was not available until very recently, or I probably would have done it that way. But I did it wire by wire, and anyway, I hope this helps somebody. It would have saved me. This video would have saved me probably about $1,000 in IDMs, and you know. Oh, another thing you might want to. I kept having a leak in this thing, and you can buy those now on eBay, the overflow tank. This thing is aluminum, and it solved a big problem for me. And mine, I kept buying them, and they kept leaking, you know. They crack. Where they usually crack is right up in here somewhere, but the aluminum one, that problem has gone away. So anyway, hopefully this helps, guys. It helped me. It completely put the problem to bed. But of course, I've got new injectors now, and I've got new under the valve cover gaskets. So, and I've got new glow plugs. By the way, if you put glow plugs in this thing, you might want to get the OEM glow plug. I had experience with the aftermarket ones that didn't last, and boy, try starting in the cold without glow plugs. You almost can't do it, you know. So I bought the OEM ones. They say Germany right in the side of them, and I don't know where they come from, Germany. But I mean, they're Ford. I buy them on eBay, and if there's other ones that are just as good, okay, fine. But my experience is the aftermarket ones don't work very good. So anyway, I hope this helps, guys. Take care. Bye.